Verstappen uncovered something in the simulator that could erase years of Red Bull's pain in Singapore. Laurent Mekies himself could not believe the leaked data. A secret setup philosophy threatens to flip the championship fight on its head. This discovery might turn Verstappen's kryptonite into his ultimate weapon. Max Verstappen's simulator work has shifted the ground beneath Formula One. What began as a dominant win in Baku was not the story of another routine race, but the confirmation that Red Bull had found something deeper. That victory, built on 51 flawless laps, was the visible sign of weeks of hidden preparation. Verstappen's obsession in Milton Keynes transformed the RB21 from a car that struggled in high downforce setups into one that might finally thrive under them. This is the foundation of the shock now rippling through the paddock. Laurent Mekies' disbelief is the clearest proof of the stakes. Ferrari built their strategy around Singapore being the one place where Red Bull faltered. For years, the street circuit's heat and tight corners punished the Milton Keynes concept. Mekies expected the same script, one that gave Ferrari a glimmer of control. Instead, he was confronted with data suggesting that Red Bull had discovered stability, traction, and predictability in exactly the areas where they had always suffered. For a rival strategist, that is a nightmare scenario. The historical weight makes it even more dramatic. 8 attempts, 0 victories. Verstappen's record in Singapore is one of the strangest anomalies in modern Formula One. Even in seasons of dominance, he left Marina Bay empty-handed. But the simulator sessions revealed setups that turned kryptonite into a possible weapon. Verstappen has reported balance under heavy downforce loads, engineers confirm stability through 19 corners, and the RB21 now looks like a car built for the very track that once exposed its weaknesses. That reversal of fortune could change not only a race but a season. Psychologically, the implications are vast. Verstappen has entered Singapore in past years braced for survival. This time, his language has shifted, no talk of damage limitation, only of opportunity. Marco has called it the ultimate test. Watch insists that if they are competitive there, the problem is solved. That confidence, grounded in simulator evidence, is as dangerous to rivals as any lap time. When Verstappen believes in his car, the paddock knows he can extract everything from it. This time, it is Ferrari and McLaren who feel the weight of doubt. The championship picture is equally affected. With 7 races remaining and a gap of 69 points to Piastri, Verstappen needs a breakthrough. Singapore, once his weakest battlefield, might provide it. If the RB21 validates its simulator promise, Red Bull could transform the title fight overnight. For McLaren, the fear is clear: if Verstappen can be competitive here, he can be competitive everywhere. For Ferrari, the blow is worse: their urban stronghold no longer exists. Both rivals are forced to rethink their strategies under pressure. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix looked like business as usual for Max Verstappen, but beneath the surface it was anything but ordinary. He led all 51 laps, pulling out more than 14 seconds on Russell and Sainz, and in doing so cut the deficit to Piastri to 69 points. To casual eyes it was just another dominant afternoon. But insiders knew this was the first visible proof that Red Bull had cracked something deeper. It was not just the Monza floor upgrade working, it was Verstappen's relentless grind in the simulator paying dividends. That win was the spark, the signal that preparation had shifted from routine to revolutionary, and Singapore would be the ultimate stage for the reveal. Back in Milton Keynes, Verstappen locked himself in the simulator. Not for hours, but for marathons stretching as long as 10 hours in a single run. He was not just adjusting wing angles or testing tire wear. He was dismantling and rebuilding the RB21 in a digital environment, exploring balance philosophies that Red Bull had never dared to run on track. He recreated the humidity, the darkness, the temperature drops between practice and race. This was preparation at a level Formula One rarely sees from a driver. Verstappen was not rehearsing Singapore, he was reinventing it. The first whispers of what he discovered began to leak through the paddock. Stability in slow corners, traction out of the hairpins, predictability over bumps, traits the RB21 had conspicuously lacked all season. Ferrari expected the same old story: Red Bull struggling under maximum downforce. But when Laurent Mekies was briefed on the numbers, his reaction was disbelief. The fortress they had counted on was no longer secure. The data suggested that Red Bull had found a setup window where the car did not merely tolerate heavy downforce, it thrived under it. This is why Baku was not the end of a chapter but the prologue. That race proved the car could dominate on a fast street circuit with long straights, but Verstappen was already preparing for the real examination. Marina Bay has 19 corners, relentless changes of direction, and suffocating heat. Historically, it has been the undoing of Red Bull's concepts. Yet the simulator sessions pointed to something unprecedented, a car that could carry the required load without losing its trademark agility. That was the revelation that stunned rivals and left Mekies questioning his own assumptions. Verstappen's obsession with detail explains the magnitude of the shift. Remember when, before Jeddah's debut in 2021, he sourced an unofficial track model online just to practice? That same mentality has now been applied with surgical intensity to Singapore. Every braking point, every throttle map, every tire degradation scenario was rehearsed until failure modes turned into repeatable patterns. When you combine that kind of preparation with the most ruthless racer of his generation, you are no longer talking about marginal gains. You are talking about rewriting the boundaries of possibility. And so we arrive at the present moment. Verstappen is heading into Singapore with more than optimism, he has evidence. Red Bull's engineers confirm the numbers, the driver believes the feel, and Ferrari sees their advantage crumbling. What was supposed to be the race where Verstappen's campaign faltered may now become the platform for a resurgence. Laurent Mekies does not believe it because, for Ferrari, belief in those numbers is tantamount to admitting the title fight is no longer safe. This is the tension we carry into Marina Bay. And remember, this is only the beginning. The victory in Baku may look straightforward on paper, but its significance cannot be overstated. Verstappen did not just lead 51 laps, he owned every sector, every restart, every ounce of race pace. He crossed the finish line more than 14 seconds clear, a margin that felt like a punch to the gut for rivals who believed Red Bull's struggles earlier in the season were permanent. That result alone closed the gap to Piastri to 69 points. In a long championship, the deficit is still daunting, but the message was clear: Verstappen had re-entered the conversation. More importantly, the win was the first piece of hard evidence that the simulator work from Milton Keynes was not theoretical, it was translating to cold, hard stopwatch reality. The post-race analysis revealed why Baku was different. It was not luck, and it was not circumstance. It was the Monza floor, a component that transformed the car's aerodynamic profile. By reshaping the airflow under the RB21, it opened a performance window that had been closed all season. Suddenly the car accepted a wider range of ride heights and downforce levels without destabilizing the rear end. Engineers could push harder on setup experiments without fear of collapse. Verstappen sensed this change immediately, and instead of just celebrating another win, he used it as the foundation to explore deeper solutions in the simulator. The floor was not the answer, it was the key that unlocked the door. Pierre Wach, Red Bull's technical director, admitted as much. He explained that the breakthrough was not only in the parts but in the philosophy. The team had shifted its approach to configuring the car for race weekends. Where once they tried to patch weaknesses, they now sought to redefine balance from the ground up. That mindset dovetailed perfectly with Verstappen's simulator obsession. His input was not about feel alone, but about creating logical structures the engineers could test and validate. It became a loop: Verstappen tested, engineers refined, Verstappen returned to push the concept further. Baku's win was the visible outcome of that hidden cycle of iteration. Verstappen's dedication went far beyond the norm. While other drivers typically clock a handful of simulator sessions before a race, Verstappen was running marathons, sometimes 10 hours in one sitting. He was not rehearsing lines or practicing reflexes, he was constructing strategies. He built tire degradation models, simulated the drop in grip across the long race distance, and mapped how the RB21 would behave as the track rubbered in. This level of immersion blurred the line between driver and engineer. Verstappen was effectively co-designing the car's identity for high downforce tracks, something few champions in history have ever attempted so directly. The results were dramatic. In the simulator, Verstappen found setups where the RB21 not only tolerated Singapore-style downforce but responded positively to it. Instead of feeling sluggish and unpredictable, the car became balanced, even stable under heavy braking into tight corners. Traction on exit, once the Achilles heel, suddenly looked manageable. For Red Bull engineers, it was like discovering a hidden chapter in the car's design manual. Configurations they thought would destabilize the car instead unlocked grip. This was why Baku was so important. It proved these ideas were not fantasies. They had real-world potential, ready to be unleashed under the floodlights of Marina Bay. And this is the heart of the shock that rippled through the paddock. When whispers of these discoveries reached Ferrari, Laurent Mekies could not believe them. For years, Ferrari's comfort in high-downforce urban tracks was an assumed advantage. Red Bull's struggles were a constant, a strategic pillar. If Verstappen's simulator data was real, it meant that pillar was gone. It meant Ferrari's best opportunity to exploit weakness was about to disappear. And in Formula One, losing a known advantage is just as painful as watching a rival gain outright speed. That disbelief from Mekies is the clearest sign of all. Red Bull has changed the game, and Singapore will prove whether the revolution is complete. Singapore has long been the ultimate stress test for Red Bull. The heat, the humidity, and the 19 corners of Marina Bay have exposed the same flaw time and again. When forced to run maximum downforce, the car became heavy, unstable, and unable to sustain tire life. Verstappen could dominate in Monza, Silverstone, or Baku, but the moment he faced Singapore's stop-start rhythm, the balance collapsed. It was not bad luck, it was a structural weakness in the concept. Rival teams, especially Ferrari, counted on it every season. They knew Red Bull would bleed points under the floodlights, and that certainty shaped entire championship strategies. For Verstappen, each return to Marina Bay meant reliving the same script: fight the car, wrestle the tires, salvage what you can. What has changed now is the simulator data. Verstappen's work did not stop at replicating conditions, it went deeper into integration. He combined the new Monza floor with suspension settings that had never before been paired at Red Bull. Traditionally, raising the rear ride height destabilized the airflow under the car. This time, the new floor held the flow steady, creating downforce without the chaos. That single adjustment allowed engineers to push further into setup ranges they had avoided for years. Suddenly, the RB21 was no longer allergic to downforce. It could embrace it, generate grip, and stay balanced through the trickiest sequences. That is a paradigm shift, and it came not from a part but from a driver's persistence. The implications are enormous. If Red Bull can run heavy downforce without fear of overheating or instability, it flips the very identity of the car. Singapore's slow hairpins in 90-degree corners have always punished them, but now the simulator suggests traction on exit and predictability in braking. Verstappen reported the car felt neutral, not nervous, under loads that once made it skittish. For a driver who thrives on precision, this is a weapon. Instead of tiptoeing through Sector 3, he can attack, confident that the rear will not step out unpredictably. That small detail, confidence and stability, translates into tenths per lap. Over 60 laps in Singapore, those tenths compound into the difference between podiums and dominance. It also changes how Red Bull manages its weekends. In the past, Singapore was approached as damage limitation, sacrifice setup to preserve tires, accept compromises in qualifying, and pray for a safety car. But Verstappen's findings suggest they can flip the approach. They can run aggressive configurations, target pole position, and control the pace from the front. That mentality shift, from surviving to dictating, is as important as the technical gain itself. Because in Formula One, confidence is performance. A team that believes in its package races differently, strategizes differently, and transmits pressure back to its rivals. Ferrari expected Red Bull to defend. Now they may have to chase. This is why Laurent Mekies was left stunned. Ferrari's advantage on street circuits has been their lifeline. They knew Red Bull could be beaten when grip mattered more than horsepower. But if Red Bull's simulator discoveries hold true, Ferrari lose that safety net. It means that every track, even the slowest, could now fall into Red Bull's hands. Mekies' disbelief was not just about the numbers, it was about the loss of certainty. In a sport defined by margins, having one track you can count on is priceless. Losing it is devastating. For Ferrari, Singapore no longer looks like an ally. It looks like the battlefield where their title hopes could unravel. And beyond Ferrari, the shockwaves extend to McLaren and Piastri. They had built their championship logic on the assumption that Red Bull would stumble at circuits like Marina Bay. Verstappen's relentless simulator grind has threatened to dismantle that assumption entirely. If the RB21 can be fast in Singapore, it can be fast anywhere. That is the essence of this technical explanation. It is not about one setup trick or one floor upgrade. It is about unlocking a new philosophy of car behavior, one that closes Red Bull's greatest weakness. For Verstappen, that means going into Singapore not with excuses, but with a chance to finally exorcise a decade-long ghost. Max Verstappen's career has been defined by conquering circuits, often with ruthless efficiency, yet Singapore remains the one glaring exception. 8 appearances, and never a single victory. For a driver with more than 60 career wins, that record feels anomalous, almost surreal. His best results, 2 second places and a third, came only after intense struggles. The most painful moment arrived in 2023, when the reigning champion qualified 11th and finished 5th. That was his only race outside the podium in an otherwise dominant season. Marina Bay has been his kryptonite, a place where every weakness in Red Bull's design philosophy has been laid bare under the floodlights. Year after year, rivals counted on this anomaly, and Verstappen was forced to accept it as part of his narrative. The twist now is that the simulator work suggests this entire narrative could be flipped upside down. Instead of heading to Singapore braced for damage limitation, Verstappen might arrive with the chance to dominate. The very corners that once trapped him, the 90-degree bends and the slow traction zones, could now play to Red Bull's reconfigured strengths. The discovery of balance under heavy downforce means Verstappen can attack with confidence where he used to hesitate. Imagine the psychological shock of seeing him not just competitive but commanding on the streets where he has always been vulnerable. That possibility alone is enough to rewrite expectations across the paddock. For Ferrari, this is the nightmare scenario. Laurent Mekies has lived seasons where Singapore was the great leveler, the circuit that gave them an edge even when Red Bull was untouchable elsewhere. To see that advantage crumble in the space of a simulator program is staggering. Ferrari's strategies relied on the assumption that Verstappen would falter here. Without that, the entire logic of their championship approach shifts. Mekies' disbelief was not merely emotional, it was strategic. Because if Verstappen wins in Singapore, Ferrari lose their strongest card, and Red Bull gain momentum that could carry through the rest of the season. The drama also extends to McLaren and Oscar Piastri. The young Australian leads the standings with consistency, but even he has not faced the kind of pressure Verstappen can generate when the tide turns. If Verstappen conquers Singapore, it is not just a win, it is a message that no circuit is safe. Piastri would be forced to defend his lead without the comfort of knowing that certain tracks would tilt in McLaren's favor. That mental weight, especially for a driver still fresh at the sharp end of the title fight, could prove decisive. The twist is not only technical, it is psychological. It is the shift from certainty to uncertainty, from advantage to vulnerability. Verstappen himself understands the symbolism. Conquering Singapore would not simply add another trophy to his cabinet. It would mean closing the last open wound in his Formula One journey. Every champion has circuits they prefer, but few have a kryptonite as visible as Marina Bay has been for Verstappen. To transform it into a fortress of dominance would be a statement of legacy, not just of form. It would mean he had eliminated every weakness, that there was nowhere left on the calendar where rivals could expect him to struggle. In Formula One, that kind of completeness is rare, almost mythical.